I can't believe they did this to me, Sarah whispered, her hands trembling as she stared at the empty phone screen. Her parents, the people who should have been there for her, had just refused to help her pay for the surgery that could save her life. $10,000. It wasn't a small amount, but it was nothing compared to the medical bills she had racked up in recent months. Yet, her parents, David and Laura Miller, had looked at her with cold eyes and said no. It wasn't just the money. It was the complete disregard for her well-being. The disappointment settled in her chest like a weight she couldn't escape. Sarah had always been the responsible one in the family, the one who made sure everything ran smoothly. And yet, when it came to her own future, she was left to figure it out on her own. She had been working 2 jobs, barely making ends meet. And now, the very people who should have supported her were turning their backs. She wasn't asking for a handout. She just needed a little help. But they couldn't see past their own comfort, their own priorities. Her mind raced. How could they do this to her? She had given up so much for them over the years, always putting their needs before hers, and now she was being treated as if she didn't matter. You'll be fine, her father had said, his voice flat, as if it was no big deal. You can figure this out on your own. Her mother hadn't even spoken. She just stared at Sarah, her eyes filled with something Sarah couldn't quite understand. It wasn't concern. It wasn't love. It was indifference. As the door clicked shut behind her, Sarah stood frozen for a moment, staring at the empty room. This was the last straw. For years, she had tried to live up to their expectations, always striving to be the perfect daughter, the one they could rely on. But now, she realized it was never enough. No matter how hard she worked, how much she sacrificed, they would never truly see her. They would never care. And just like that, she felt herself breaking. Not from the pain of her illness, not from the fear of what came next, but from the crushing realization that the people she had always trusted were the ones who had let her down the most. She needed help, but they wouldn't give it to her. She didn't know where to turn next. But then, a memory flashed in her mind. Her grandmother, Evelyn Miller, had always been there for her. Evelyn, the one person who had never turned her away, who always offered her unconditional support. Maybe, just maybe, Evelyn would help her. With a deep breath, Sarah reached for her phone and dialed the number she knew by heart. The phone rang, and as it did, she felt a flicker of hope. The call went to voicemail, but Sarah wasn't discouraged. She left a message, her voice shaking slightly as she spoke. "Grandma, it's me, Sarah. I need your help. I don't know what to do anymore." She hung up and sat back, her heart pounding. She wasn't sure if Evelyn could help her, but at least she could try. She had to try. And she knew that no matter what happened, Evelyn would never turn her away. Sarah sat in the small, quiet apartment she had rented after leaving her parents' home, the weight of the evening's events still lingering in the pit of her stomach. The phone in her hand lay heavy, the screen blank, showing no response from her grandmother. She had hoped for a call back right away, but the silence was deafening. She sat back, staring at the walls that had never felt this cold before. This was her life now, alone, uncertain, abandoned by the very people who should have been her safety net. Her mind drifted back to her parents' words, their faces when they refused to help her. It wasn't just the money. It was the look of indifference that had cut deeper than any words. They didn't care. At least, that's how it felt. She had always been the one to hold things together for them, the one to pick up the pieces when things went wrong. But now, when it was her turn to need help, she was left standing alone. She couldn't understand it. Why couldn't they see how serious this was? Why couldn't they see how much pain she was in, both physically and emotionally? Sarah looked at the calendar on the wall, the date circled in red, the day of her surgery. It was just a week away. The thought of going through with it, without any support from her family, was terrifying. She had no idea how she was going to manage the medical bills, the recovery, or anything else. She needed that $10,000. She needed to survive. Her thoughts swirled, a constant whirlpool of fear and confusion. Her mind kept going back to Evelyn, her grandmother. Evelyn had always been there when no one else was. She remembered the summers spent at her grandmother's house, the way Evelyn would let her stay up late, telling her stories of the past. Evelyn had always been the one to make Sarah feel safe, to make her feel like she mattered. And now, as an adult, Sarah was desperately hoping for that same comfort. As she stood up, walking toward the kitchen, she stared out the window, her gaze lost in the darkness of the night. She had always been proud of her independence, but now, she felt like everything was slipping away. The bills were piling up, and the pressure was suffocating. She needed help, and she couldn't bear the thought of asking her parents again. Her pride wouldn't let her. But Evelyn was different. She could still remember the warmth of her grandmother's embrace, the way Evelyn would always make her feel like she was the most important person in the world. Sarah didn't know what to expect when her grandmother finally called back, but she was willing to take that risk. Evelyn would understand. Evelyn always understood. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. Sarah's heart skipped a beat, and she quickly grabbed it. "Hello," she answered, her voice trembling. "Sarah?" Evelyn's voice came through, calm and soothing. "Are you okay, darling?" Sarah closed her eyes, a single tear slipping down her cheek. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear Evelyn's voice. "Grandma, I don't know what to do," she whispered. "I've got the surgery in a week, and my parents won't help me. I'm scared, Grandma." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Evelyn's silence was comforting, like a warm embrace. "Sarah," Evelyn said softly, "I've always believed family is about supporting each other. I'm here for you. Always." Sarah's heart swelled with relief. She hadn't even realized how much she had been missing that support until now. She wasn't alone. Evelyn was here, and that was all she needed to know. Sarah sat back, her fingers still holding the phone to her ear after Evelyn's words echoed in her mind. "I'm here for you. Always." It was the reassurance Sarah had desperately needed. The weight of the world seemed to lift off her shoulders, just for a moment. It felt like a lifeline, a thread of hope in a sea of uncertainty. Evelyn wasn't just offering her help. She was offering her something deeper. It was love. Unconditional, unwavering love that Sarah hadn't felt in a long time. Not from her parents, not from anyone. She wiped her eyes, still stunned by the relief, and steadied her breath. "Thank you, Grandma," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Thank you so much." Evelyn didn't respond right away, and Sarah thought she might have hung up, but then her voice came back, soft and filled with warmth. "Sarah, I'll take care of things. You just focus on getting better, okay? Let me worry about the rest." Sarah nodded, even though Evelyn couldn't see her. "I will," she promised. And in that moment, she believed it. Evelyn was going to help her, and that thought gave Sarah the courage to face the difficult days ahead. She had always been independent, proud of the way she could take care of herself, but now, she realized, there was no shame in accepting help when it was offered. No shame in admitting that she couldn't do it alone. When the call ended, Sarah sat there for a long while, letting the silence fill the room. She had no idea how Evelyn was going to solve this, but she trusted her grandmother. After all, Evelyn had always been there when Sarah needed her most, and this time would be no different. The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the otherwise quiet room. It was a stark reminder that time was running out. Sarah still had the surgery to worry about, and the money for it was still an issue. But now, there was a sense of peace she hadn't felt before. Evelyn was taking charge, and for once, Sarah didn't have to carry the burden alone. The next morning, Sarah woke up early, her body aching from the stress and uncertainty of the past few days. The pain was still there, constant and nagging, but it seemed less overwhelming now. She took a deep breath, feeling a renewed sense of determination. It wasn't over. She wasn't going to give up. Not yet. She had her surgery to face, and whatever else came after that, she would face it head on. There would be no more hiding in the shadows. No more pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. Her grandmother's support had given her a glimpse of what it meant to be cared for, to have someone truly in her corner. And for the first time in a long while, Sarah didn't feel so alone. She picked up her phone again and started typing a text. "Thank you for everything, Grandma. I can't wait to see you soon." She sent it without hesitation, her fingers moving quickly. There was a smile on her face as she hit send. Evelyn had done more than offer financial help. She had reminded Sarah of the importance of family, of love, and of standing together, no matter the obstacles. And now, Sarah was ready to face those obstacles, with or without her parents' approval. She was stronger than she had been before. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but Sarah wasn't afraid anymore. Not with Evelyn by her side. Sarah's surgery was just a few days away. The time was slipping through her fingers, and there was still so much left to prepare. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her chest. Her body ached, and the pain from her illness was growing, But it was different now. It wasn't just physical pain. It was the emotional toll of everything that had happened. Her parents had refused to help, leaving her in a place she never thought she would be. And yet, through all of it, there was a flicker of hope. Evelyn had come through for her in a way that Sarah could never have expected. The thought of her grandmother's support was a constant comfort. It was as if Evelyn's strength had been transferred to her, and Sarah could feel the strength growing inside her. But the question still lingered. What would happen after the surgery? Would she be okay? Would she recover? Would her parents ever come around? She didn't know the answers, but for the first time, she realized it didn't matter as much as it used to. Sarah wasn't defined by what others thought of her. She was stronger than she had ever known, and she had learned that she didn't need anyone's approval to move forward. She had Evelyn's support, and that was enough. The day before her surgery, Sarah sat in her small apartment, looking at the empty room. It wasn't much, but it was hers. She had worked hard to make it her own, and it felt like the only place where she could truly be herself. She closed her eyes and thought about the future. She didn't know what it held, but she knew she would face it with strength and determination. No matter what happened, she was going to be okay. She was going to make it through this, one step at a time. The phone rang, and Sarah's heart skipped a beat. It was Evelyn. "Hello." Sarah answered quickly, her voice filled with a mix of anxiety and anticipation. "Hi, darling." Evelyn's familiar voice came through the phone. "How are you feeling? Are you ready for tomorrow?" Sarah took a deep breath and smiled. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady. "It's been a rough few days, but I'm ready." Evelyn paused for a moment before speaking again. "You've got this, Sarah. You're stronger than you know. And no matter what happens tomorrow, I'm here for you. Always." Sarah's heart swelled with gratitude. She didn't need anyone else's approval. Not anymore. "Thank you, Grandma," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm so glad I have you." "You're never alone, darling," Evelyn replied softly. "I'll be with you every step of the way." After they hung up, Sarah sat back and closed her eyes. For the first time in days, she felt at peace. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure. She was not going to face it alone. Evelyn's love was a constant, and with that support, she felt ready to face whatever came next. As the sun set and the city lights flickered outside her window, Sarah felt a sense of calm wash over her. Tomorrow would be hard, but she would get through it. She had to. And in the end, no matter what happened, she would be stronger for it. The morning of Sarah's surgery arrived, and the weight of everything hit her all at once. She had barely slept the night before, her mind racing with thoughts of what was to come. The thought of being put under, of not knowing if she would wake up and feel the same again, made her stomach churn. The hospital room was cold, sterile, and distant, not like the comfort of her grandmother's home or the warm memories of simpler days. But Evelyn's voice echoed in her mind. "I'm here for you. Always." And it steadied her heart. She had prepared herself for this moment, but nothing could truly prepare her for what was about to happen. As she lay in that sterile hospital bed, she clutched the small charm Evelyn had given her years ago. It was a silver heart, engraved with the words strength and love. Sarah closed her eyes and held on to the charm, remembering all the times her grandmother had been her anchor. The nurses came in to check on her, giving her reassuring smiles, but they couldn't touch the fear that curled in her chest. No matter how many times she told herself that everything would be okay, there was still a part of her that was terrified. After what felt like hours, the doctor entered the room. His presence was calm, professional, but something about the way he looked at her made her feel like she wasn't just another patient. "How are you feeling, Sarah?" he asked gently. She gave him a tight smile, doing her best to mask the nervousness she was feeling. "I'm ready," she said, her voice a little shakier than she had intended. The doctor nodded, seeming to sense her anxiety. "You're in good hands," he reassured her, and for a brief moment, Sarah believed him. As they wheeled her into the operating room, Sarah fought the overwhelming urge to close her eyes and escape. She wanted to be brave, but the unknown felt like a heavy fog. She glanced at the clock on the wall, noting that it was still early in the morning. Time felt suspended, as though it was standing still just for her. The operating room was bright, filled with the sharp scent of antiseptic. The staff moved around her with practiced efficiency, and Sarah did her best to focus on the small details. The way the light flickered overhead, the soft hum of machines, the quiet murmurs of voices. It all felt distant, as if she were floating above it all, disconnected from the reality of what was happening to her body. "Sarah, we're going to start now," one of the nurses said, her voice gentle and kind. Sarah nodded, her hands clutching the blanket over her chest. The last thing she remembered was the coolness of the anesthesia mask being placed over her face, followed by the soft, comforting darkness that slowly overtook her mind. When Sarah finally opened her eyes again, everything felt different. There was a dull ache in her body, and the room was quieter than before. Her head felt fuzzy, as if she were waking from a deep sleep. It took her a moment to gather her thoughts, to remember where she was. And then it all came rushing back, the surgery, the fear, the uncertainty. But now, there was something else too. A sense of relief. She had made it through. The surgery was over, and she had survived. As the nurse entered the room, she smiled when she saw Sarah awake. "How are you feeling?" she asked, her voice soft. Sarah blinked, taking in the room around her. She didn't feel like herself. She felt different, and yet, there was a quiet strength growing inside her. "I'm okay," she whispered. The nurse nodded, adjusting the blankets around her. "You did great," she said. "The surgery went well, and you're going to be just fine." Sarah's heart fluttered at those words. She had done it. She had made it through the surgery. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, everything would be okay. Evelyn's words echoed in her mind again. "I'm here for you. Always." The thought of her grandmother, of her love and support, made Sarah's chest tighten with gratitude. She wasn't alone. And for the first time in a long time, Sarah allowed herself to believe that everything could be all right. The days after Sarah's surgery passed in a blur. Her body was healing, but her mind was restless. Every time she moved, a dull ache reminded her of the procedure, and yet there was a quiet comfort in knowing she had made it through. As the days grew into a week, Sarah felt a slow shift within herself. The fear she had carried for so long began to fade, replaced by something else. A new sense of strength was growing, the kind that came from surviving something that had once seemed impossible. She thought about how, just a short time ago, she had felt completely alone, abandoned by the people she loved most. Her parents had refused to help her, and she had wondered if they cared at all. But now, as she sat in the quiet of her apartment, her mind turning over the events of the last few weeks, she realized something. She hadn't been truly alone. Evelyn had been there for her, from the very beginning, offering support in ways that Sarah hadn't even imagined. She had given Sarah the courage to face her fears and to fight for herself. Sarah knew now that her grandmother's love was something she could always count on. She picked up her phone, scrolling through her contacts until she found Evelyn's name. She hesitated for a moment before pressing the call button. The phone rang, and Sarah's heart beat faster. She hadn't spoken to her grandmother since the surgery, and part of her felt nervous about how much had changed in such a short amount of time. When Evelyn answered, her voice was soft and warm, just like Sarah remembered. "Hello, darling," she said, her words wrapping around Sarah like a comforting embrace. "How are you feeling today?" Sarah smiled at the sound of her grandmother's voice. "Better," she said honestly, her voice steady. "I'm still a little sore, but I'm getting there." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and Sarah could almost feel the love and concern pouring through the phone. "I'm so proud of you, Sarah," Evelyn said softly. "You've been through so much, and you've come out stronger. That's not something everyone can say." Sarah's throat tightened at her grandmother's words. She had never felt this kind of unconditional support before, and it filled a part of her heart that had been empty for so long. "Thank you, Grandma," she whispered. "I don't know what I would have done without you." "You don't have to thank me, darling," Evelyn replied, her voice warm with affection. "You're my family, and I will always be here for you. I'm just glad you're okay." Sarah took a deep breath, her heart swelling with gratitude. She had been so focused on the pain and the fear that she had almost forgotten what it felt like to be truly loved and supported. But Evelyn's words reminded her of what really mattered. She wasn't alone. She would never be alone as long as she had Evelyn by her side. "I don't know what's next, Grandma," Sarah admitted, the uncertainty creeping back into her voice. "I'm still scared, even though I made it through the surgery. I just don't know what's going to happen now." Evelyn's voice was steady and reassuring. "That's okay, Sarah. No one has all the answers. But you've already taken the first step. You've shown that you're strong, and you can handle whatever comes next." Sarah sat back, letting her grandmother's words sink in. She was right. She didn't have to have everything figured out right now. What mattered was that she had survived. She had faced something terrifying and come out the other side. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like she could handle whatever life threw her way. "I'll be okay, Grandma," Sarah said, a sense of peace settling over her. "I will be." "Of course, you will, darling," Evelyn said gently. "I'm proud of you. Always." And with that, Sarah felt the last of her fear melt away. The road ahead would still be uncertain, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't facing it alone. Days turned into weeks as Sarah continued her recovery, and with each passing day, she felt a little stronger, a little more like herself. The surgery was behind her, but the emotional scars were still fresh. Despite everything, she found herself grappling with the knowledge that her parents hadn't come to check on her, hadn't offered any support beyond the refusal they had given her. The lack of communication from them weighed heavily on her. They hadn't even called to ask how she was doing after the surgery. The silence from her parents was deafening, a painful reminder of the emotional distance between them. But then, one day, there was a shift. Sarah was sitting in her living room, the sunlight streaming through the window, when her phone buzzed. She picked it up, expecting to see another message from Evelyn, but instead, her heart skipped a beat when she saw the name on the screen, David Miller. Her father. She hesitated for a moment before answering, her fingers trembling slightly as she pressed the green button. "Hello," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. There was a brief pause on the other end of the line, and then her father's voice came through, more hesitant than she had ever heard it. "Sarah, it's your dad. How are you feeling?" Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She wasn't sure if she should be relieved, angry, or somewhere in between. After weeks of silence, he was finally reaching out. It was a small gesture, but for Sarah, it felt like the world was shifting in ways she hadn't expected. "I'm doing okay," she replied, her voice soft but firm. "Still recovering, but I'm getting there." There was another pause, and Sarah could hear the sound of her father's breathing, the hesitation hanging in the air. I'm sorry, Sarah," he said, his voice quieter now. "I should have been there for you. I shouldn't have treated you the way I did. I don't know what came over me." Sarah's heart thudded in her chest. She wasn't sure how to respond. All this time, she had waited for this moment, waited for him to acknowledge what had happened, and now that it was here, she wasn't sure if it was enough. "It's been hard," Sarah said, her voice steady, but the weight of the past few weeks heavy in every word. "You didn't just say no to the surgery. You made me feel like I wasn't important, like I didn't matter." There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and Sarah could almost hear the regret in her father's sigh. "I know," he finally said, "and I'm sorry. I should have been there for you, Sarah. I don't know what happened, but I know I was wrong." Sarah closed her eyes, feeling a mix of emotions swirl inside her. She had spent so many nights thinking about this moment, imagining what she would say when it finally came. But now, it didn't feel like the victory she had imagined. It just felt complicated. "I've been through a lot, Dad," she said softly, "and I've learned that I can't rely on people who don't see me. But I've also learned that I don't need their approval to move forward." There was a long pause, and for the first time in a long while, Sarah felt a sense of clarity. She didn't need her parents' validation. She didn't need their permission to be strong. She was strong, with or without them. "I don't expect things to be the same," she continued, her voice calm but firm. "But I need to know that you understand why this hurt. And I need to know that it won't happen again." Her father was silent for a moment, and then he spoke again, his voice softer this time. "I understand, Sarah, and I will do better. I promise." Sarah nodded, even though he couldn't see her. "That's all I need to hear," she said, her voice steady. "I'm going to be okay, Dad. I just need you to be okay too." The conversation ended with an awkward silence, but for Sarah, it felt like a chapter was closing. She wasn't sure where things would go with her parents from here, but she knew one thing. She had taken back her power. She didn't need their approval to move forward. She didn't need to wait for their love to feel whole. She had her own love, her own strength, and that was enough. As she set the phone down, Sarah took a deep breath and let herself feel the weight of the moment. She had faced the pain, the rejection, and the fear, and now she was ready for the next chapter of her life. Weeks passed, and Sarah slowly returned to the rhythm of life, though it was a different rhythm now. Her body had healed from the surgery, But the emotional journey was far from over. Her parents' apology, while a step in the right direction, hadn't erased the years of disappointment, and it certainly hadn't erased the way they had made her feel small when she had needed them the most. But Sarah was beginning to understand something important. She didn't need their approval to feel whole. She had always thought that family was the ultimate source of validation, but now, she realized that family didn't always act in the way you expected. And sometimes, the love you needed wasn't the love that came from the people you thought would always have your back. It was the love you created for yourself. As she sat in the quiet of her apartment one evening, sipping a cup of tea, she thought about the journey she had been on. The pain, the rejection, the struggle. It had all led her here, to this moment, where she could finally say, without hesitation, that she was proud of herself. It wasn't easy. It never was. But she had done it. And for the first time in her life, she felt like she was standing on her own 2 feet, strong and steady. The phone buzzed on the table beside her, breaking her from her thoughts. It was a text from Evelyn. "I'm so proud of you, Sarah. Keep going. I'm always here for you." Sarah smiled, the warmth of her grandmother's words filling her chest. It was like Evelyn had known exactly what Sarah needed to hear at that very moment. She had always been the constant, the steady hand, the one who believed in Sarah even when she couldn't believe in herself. That was the love that had made all the difference. The love that Sarah would carry with her, no matter where life took her. She typed a quick reply. "Thank you, Grandma. I couldn't have done it without you." A simple message, but it held so much meaning. As Sarah set her phone down, she looked out the window at the city lights, sparkling in the distance. She didn't know what the future held. It was still uncertain, still full of questions and unknowns. But for the first time, she felt like she could handle whatever came her way. She was no longer waiting for someone else's approval. She had learned to approve of herself, to trust herself, and to keep moving forward. She wasn't sure where the road would lead, but she knew one thing for certain. She was stronger than she had ever been before. The woman who had once felt small and invisible now stood tall, ready to face whatever came next. And as she sat there, thinking about everything she had overcome, she couldn't help but smile. Life might not have turned out the way she had planned, but it had turned out the way it was meant to. And for Sarah, that was enough. It had been a few months since Sarah's surgery, and the world felt different now. It wasn't just the physical healing that had taken place, but the emotional transformation that had slowly, almost imperceptibly, taken hold of her. Sarah had learned something she hadn't known before. She didn't need anyone's approval to be happy. Her relationship with her parents remained distant, but for the first time, that didn't bother her. The silence between them was no longer a source of pain. She had accepted it, and in doing so, she had freed herself from the need for their validation. Evelyn remained her steady anchor, the one person who had never faltered in her support. And that was enough. Sarah had come to realize that love wasn't always about proximity. It wasn't always about being there in every moment. It was about consistency, about showing up when it mattered most, and Evelyn had done that, not just with words, but with actions. Sarah's thoughts often wandered back to that conversation with her father. The apology, though a long time coming, had been significant. It hadn't fixed everything, and it hadn't erased the past, but it had allowed Sarah to release the anger and resentment she had carried for so long. She understood now that her parents' inability to offer support wasn't a reflection of her worth. It was a reflection of their own limitations, and she no longer needed them to define who she was. She had made it through the surgery, through the pain, through the rejection, and now she was stronger than ever. She had found a well of resilience inside herself that she hadn't known existed. As the days passed, Sarah found herself doing more of the things that brought her joy. She reconnected with old friends, took long walks in the park, and spent quiet afternoons reading in the sunshine. She began to realize how much she had been holding back, waiting for the approval of others, waiting for permission to live fully. But now, she understood that she was the one who had the power to create her own happiness. One afternoon, as Sarah sat in her favorite cafe, sipping on a hot cup of tea, her phone buzzed. It was a message from her mother. She stared at the screen for a long moment, unsure of what to expect. It had been so long since they had communicated in any meaningful way. Hesitantly, she opened the message. "I know I've let you down," it read. "I don't expect things to go back to the way they were, but I want you to know that I'm proud of you. I've been thinking a lot about how I treated you, and I realize now how wrong I was. Sarah felt a knot tighten in her stomach. It wasn't an apology that healed all the wounds, but it was a step toward something new. She took a deep breath, her finger hovering over the keyboard as she thought about how to respond. Finally, she typed, "Thank you. It means a lot to me. I don't know what's next, but I'm glad we're starting to move forward." She sent the message, then set her phone down, feeling a sense of closure she hadn't known she needed. Life wasn't perfect. It wasn't neat and tidy, but Sarah had learned that it didn't have to be. She didn't need her parents' approval, and she didn't need everything to be fixed right away. What mattered was that she had the strength to move forward, to build the life she wanted on her own terms. And as she sat there, in that quiet cafe, with the sun streaming in and a sense of peace settling over her, Sarah knew that she was finally free. Free to be herself. Free to live her life, not defined by the expectations of others, but by the strength and love she had found within herself. The road ahead was hers to walk, and she would walk it with her head held high, knowing that she was enough, just as she was.